He sat on the same bench every morning, like clockwork. Head bowed, sketchpad resting on his knees, fingers stained with charcoal. To most who passed, he was just another beggar, invisible, forgettable, someone to ignore. But Aria Westwood noticed him. Maybe it was the way he smiled at strangers who never smiled back, or how he gave half his sandwich to a stray dog instead of eating it himself. There was something about him that didn't fit the world he was stuck in. Like a prince hiding in rags. And she couldn't help but wonder, who was this man, really? Aria, with her designer bags and long chestnut hair, wasn't the kind of girl who usually paid attention to men like Eli Navarro. But she wasn't like most girls from money. Her heart had always leaned toward the broken, the misunderstood. She'd grown up under the shadow of her father, Senator Calvin Westwood, a man polished in the public eye, but cold as stone behind closed doors. Everything in Aria's life was about image, power, legacy. Until she met Eli. It started with a coffee. One rainy afternoon, she offered him a cup with a shy smile, expecting a polite thank you. But instead, he looked her in the eye and said, "You didn't have to." That moment stayed with her. The way he spoke, like someone who used to belong somewhere else, somewhere important. As the weeks passed, their casual exchanges turned into long conversations. She would sneak out from class just to sit on that bench with him, sharing secrets no one else had heard. He listened, really listened, in a way no one in her world did. People began to notice. Students whispered. Her sorority sisters laughed behind her back. Her ex-boyfriend, Grayson Hale, heir to Hale Industries, warned her, "He's using you. He'll bleed you dry." But Aria didn't care. In Eli's presence, she felt human. Free. Unjudged. She brought him food, clean clothes, even slipped him money when he refused at first. Slowly, she convinced him to let her give him a new look. A haircut. A shave. A thrift store blazer. He cleaned up well, too well. That's when the cracks started to show. One night, walking him to the campus gates, Aria made a joke about classical music. Eli laughed, then quoted Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony, perfectly. Another time, she caught him sketching the architecture of the university's oldest building, down to its structural flaws, something only an engineer or an insider would know. She teased him about it, but he brushed it off with a grin. "I read a lot," he said. But something in his voice trembled. Still, she didn't push. She didn't want to scare him away. Her heart had already fallen, and the way he looked at her, like she was more than just a senator's daughter, made her believe maybe, just maybe, love didn't care about money or titles. But the world around them did. Senator Westwood found out. He summoned Aria to his office, the walls lined with leather books and secrets. "This boy," he said, his voice like ice, "will ruin you." When she refused to leave Eli, the senator tightened his grip. Cut off her cards. Froze her access to family accounts. Still, she didn't leave. Meanwhile, Grayson watched from the shadows, seething. He'd once had Aria's love, or at least, her attention. Now she gave it to someone who smelled like street dust and carried nothing but a notebook. That was unacceptable. Eli could feel the pressure building. He tried to distance himself, but Aria wouldn't let go. "You're not a project," she whispered one night, her hand in his. "You're a person. And I love you." Eli's face twisted like he wanted to believe her, but couldn't. That night, Aria found him sitting alone, eyes red, sketchpad open to a photo taped inside. A man, a woman, and a baby. They were on a private jet, smiling into the camera. Before she could ask, he closed it. Days passed. Then came the storm. The world watched as a sleek figure stepped onto the stage of the Global AI Summit. Cameras flashed. Reporters buzzed. Behind the podium, the name, Novacore Systems, blinked on the screen, one of the most powerful tech empires in the world. The man removed his glasses. Clean cut. Sharp suit. Confident. And familiar. It was Eli Navarro. Aria dropped her phone. She stared at the screen, breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. But it was. Her beggar. The man she gave coffee to. The man she loved. And now, the world's youngest tech billionaire. He spoke, voice calm but heavy with grief. For 20 years, I searched for justice. I lived without name, without wealth, to find if love still exists in a world that once stole everything from me. But today is not just about love. It's about truth. And revenge. Gasps filled the auditorium. Aria's heart pounded. She couldn't look away. I am Eli Navarro, son of Rafael and Mira Navarro, the founders of Novacore. They were murdered in a plane explosion, an accident we now know was sabotage. The screen behind him changed. Images of a destroyed aircraft. Whistleblower documents. Financial ledgers. Evidence. He wasn't just a man seeking love. He was the forgotten heir, returning to burn down the house of those who destroyed his family. Aria fell back on her couch, trembling. What did this mean for them? For everything they'd shared? And worst of all, who had betrayed his family? Her phone buzzed. It was her father. One message. Come home. Now. She didn't move. Because something in her gut told her, he already knew. And she wasn't sure if Eli's war was just against the world. Or against hers. Aria sat frozen in the quiet of her apartment, the buzz of the city outside drowned by the storm now raging inside her. The man she had fallen for, the one who used to sit quietly on a bench with charcoal-stained fingers and a gentle heart, had just shattered everything she thought she knew. Eli Navarro wasn't just a beggar. He wasn't lost. He wasn't forgotten. He had hidden in plain sight with purpose. And she had been loving a man full of secrets, secrets tied to her own bloodline. Her mind raced as she replayed the news conference over and over again. Eli standing on that stage, confident, poised, completely different yet still carrying that same haunted look in his eyes. He hadn't just climbed back to the top, he had planned it. Every step. Every silence. Every smile. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew, this had never been just about her. It was bigger. It was older. It was revenge. She clutched the phone still glowing with her father's message. Come home. Now. But what would she even say to him? What could she ask? Did he know who Eli was all along? Did he recognize him? Was he part of the betrayal that Eli spoke about? Her heart didn't want to believe it, but her instincts told her otherwise. At that same moment, Eli was sitting in a dimly lit penthouse overlooking the city skyline, his suit jacket hanging on a chair, sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of servers running in a sealed glass chamber in the corner. On a large screen in front of him were photos, documents, news clippings, emails. He clicked through them slowly, stopping at one, a younger version of Senator Calvin Westwood shaking hands with Marcus Hale, Grayson's father, in front of a Novacore prototype aircraft. Eli's jaw tightened. He didn't regret loving Aria. That was the one thing he hadn't planned. He had expected sympathy, maybe admiration. But not love. Not from someone like her. So stubborn, so sincere, so reckless in the way she gave her heart. It made his plan harder. More painful. But he couldn't stop now. Too much had been lost. Too many lies had buried the truth. And his parents deserved justice. Meanwhile, Grayson Hale was losing control. He had always been the prince of the elite, untouchable. Until Eli re-emerged. Grayson's father had started whispering warnings, canceling appearances, moving funds offshore. Something was coming, and fast. Grayson didn't care about politics or corporate wars, he cared that Aria was slipping away. Again. But this time, she wasn't just choosing someone else. She was choosing a ghost. A threat. A man who could destroy everything his family had built. He stormed into her building later that night without warning, pounding on her door. Aria opened it with hesitation, her eyes tired and red. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "You have no idea who that man really is," Grayson hissed, stepping inside. "He's dangerous. He's manipulating you." Aria crossed her arms. "No. You're afraid of him. Because he's smarter than you. Because you know what your father did, don't you?" Grayson's face hardened. "You think I had something to do with what happened to his parents?" "I was a kid, Aria." "But your father wasn't," she replied, her voice sharp now. "And neither was mine." There was silence between them. Then Grayson muttered, "You don't know everything, Aria. There's more to this than Eli's revenge story." Before she could ask what he meant, he was already walking out, leaving her standing in the doorway, heart pounding with new doubt. What was Grayson not saying? Across town, Senator Westwood was preparing his own defense. His private security had doubled. Legal advisors whispered in hushed tones. He paced his office, watching Eli's press conference for the 10th time. His hands trembled as he poured a drink. He knew this day might come. He had hoped it wouldn't. But Eli Navarro had grown into a man he hadn't expected, clever, composed, and worse, loved by his daughter. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file marked Novacore, Contingency. Inside were blueprints, contracts, and signatures. He stared at the documents, his mind spinning back to the day it all began. A deal made in desperation. Technology worth billions. And a silent agreement with Marcus Hale that had cost 2 lives, and created a ghost. And now, that ghost had returned to haunt them both. Back in her apartment, Aria opened her laptop and searched Novacore plane crash archives. Dozens of articles appeared. Most of them said the same thing: engine failure, pilot error, tragic accident. But one obscure blog post from years ago caught her attention. It was written by a retired air traffic controller who claimed the plane had no flight plan filed for that day. She leaned closer. "It was never supposed to be in the air," the post read. "I was told to ignore the radar blip." She blinked. Her hands trembled as she copied the link and saved it. Everything she had believed was being ripped apart. And yet, the one person who had every reason to lie, had given her the truth, even if in pieces. Eli had trusted her, even while hiding behind a disguise. But what would he do next? How far would he go? And would their love survive the storm he was about to unleash? Outside, the city lights flickered beneath the dark clouds rolling in. The truth was rising like thunder. And no one, not even the powerful Westwoods or the untouchable Hales, could escape what was coming. Aria sat in the back of a quiet bookstore cafe, a place she hadn't been to in years. Her hands wrapped tightly around a warm mug, but she barely sipped it. Her phone lay face down on the table, its notifications silenced. Her mind was racing, trying to untangle the threads of lies, love, and legacy. Across from her sat Lila Tran, her best friend since high school, one of the few people who had stood by her when she broke off her engagement with Grayson Hale. Lila had always been sharp, intuitive, and blunt when needed. "So, let me get this straight," Lila said slowly, eyes narrowed. "You fell in love with a guy you thought was homeless. Turns out he's actually the billionaire CEO of Novacor. And now he's back to take revenge on your father and Grayson's?" Aria nodded, unable to say it out loud. Lila leaned in. "Girl, you need to be careful. This isn't some tragic romance novel. This is real. You're in the middle of a war. And both sides could crush you." Aria looked down. "I know. But it doesn't feel like he's using me. He could have left me behind. He didn't. Or maybe," Lila said, more gently now, "you're the one piece he doesn't know how to sacrifice." The thought stung. But deep inside, it felt true. Eli hadn't just infiltrated the world that had tried to destroy him, he had done it silently, strategically, step by step. And yet, when it came to her, he seemed uncertain. Vulnerable. It was like watching a man carry a sword in one hand and a rose in the other, not sure which one to offer. Meanwhile, Eli was deep in preparation. In a room below Novacor headquarters, secured by biometric locks and invisible to the public, his team worked in silence. Dozens of monitors displayed everything, from public financial records to private emails leaked by an internal source. The tech was cutting edge, most of it developed in-house. But the weapon wasn't data. It was the truth. His lead analyst, Devon, turned to him with concern. "There's a problem," he said. "One of our inside sources just went dark. We think someone found out." Eli didn't flinch. "Which one?" "The accountant. The one who traced the offshore transfers tied to the Westwood campaign fund." Eli's eyes darkened. That file was critical. It tied Senator Westwood directly to shell companies created by Marcus Hale 2 decades ago, companies that were used to buy stolen Novacor tech and mask the funding of covert operations overseas. Without that thread, the story wouldn't connect cleanly. And he needed clean. "We'll keep digging," Eli said. "Get legal to prep the backup disclosure." Devon hesitated. "There's something else." Aria's name came up, in a surveillance ping. "Grayson's tracking her again." Eli looked up sharply. His jaw tightened. That wasn't part of the plan. Across town, Grayson Hale was growing desperate. His father had gone underground, issuing silence and shadowy instructions through intermediaries. Grayson had been left to manage the public side of their legacy, while Eli slowly peeled back every layer of their empire. What terrified him most wasn't the exposure, it was the idea that Aria might choose to stand beside Eli through it all. He watched old security footage from the campus bench. Eli, bearded, quiet, sitting with Aria. Her laughing. Her leaning in close. It burned him from the inside. How could she have fallen for him? A stranger with nothing? Unless Unless it wasn't about money for her anymore. Maybe it never was. He ordered a tail on her. Not just to know where she went, but who she was talking to, what she might be planning. If she was helping Eli, he had to know. Meanwhile, back at the Westwood estate, Senator Calvin Westwood met with his own advisors in a heavily guarded room beneath the house. Surveillance feeds showed his daughter leaving her apartment, meeting with friends, visiting places from her childhood. He wasn't just trying to protect her anymore, he was trying to anticipate her loyalty. She's spending time in areas Eli once frequented, one aide said. She's looking for something, another added. The senator exhaled sharply. Or someone. He remembered the day Eli's parents died. How convenient it had been. How necessary. The plane explosion had given them all what they wanted, sole control of the NovaCorps defense contract, no resistance from moral objectors, and a clean slate to claim victory. But they hadn't accounted for the child. They thought he would disappear into the system. Forgotten. Unimportant. Now, that forgotten boy had become the man rewriting all their futures. As days passed, the pressure grew heavier. NovaCorps shares surged after Eli's conference. News stations speculated wildly. Was he telling the truth? Would there be indictments? Who else was involved? Aria found herself torn between two lives, one rooted in legacy, the other in truth. She started visiting old places Eli had sketched, a food cart near the library, a bridge overlooking the city, the narrow alley where he used to feed stray cats. She was trying to understand him through his silence, through what he hadn't said. And the more she pieced together, the clearer it became, he had loved her even when he had no reason to trust her. But love wasn't enough. Not with this storm coming. Late one night, she returned to the bench where they first met. She sat in the same spot, wrapped in a coat, her breath visible in the cold air. She pulled out the small sketch he had once given her, a drawing of the campus with a single tree circled in red. She never understood why. Until now. Looking up, she saw it. That tree stood at the edge of the security wall between campus and the Westwood estate. It was the one blind spot. The place where Eli had watched his world burn and his enemies thrive. The place where it all began. And maybe, the place where it would all end. The next few days moved like shadows, quiet but heavy. Aria couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she stepped out of her apartment, she caught someone turning away too quickly, or a car idling longer than usual across the street. She tried to ignore it, but the tension was building, wrapping around her chest like a wire tightening with each breath. She avoided her father's calls. Ignored Grayson's sudden messages that pretended to be concerned. "You're being dragged into something dangerous," one read. Another, "You don't know who he really is." But the truth was, Aria didn't trust them anymore. Not after what she'd started to uncover. Not after seeing how far they'd go to protect their image and power. What she didn't know, what Eli hadn't told her, was that the countdown had already begun. Inside a secure NovaCorps server vault, Eli stood in front of a massive touchscreen wall. Timers ticked down silently on multiple screens. One read 48 hours. That was how long they had until the charity gala. The one event Senator Westwood and Marcus Hale couldn't afford to miss. The one place Eli planned to rip the mask off everything. Devon approached him with new intel. "Grayson's planning something. We don't know what yet, but he just authorized a massive wire to a private security firm out of Dubai. He's either scared, or about to get reckless." Eli didn't respond at first. His fingers moved over a file, opening detailed surveillance on the senator's movements. There were meetings with lawyers, confidential documents shredded, and hush money transfers flagged across multiple accounts. But none of it mattered if they couldn't tie it all together live, publicly, so no one could spin it or deny it later. He looked at Devon. We keep eyes on Aria at all times. He might try to use her. Across the city, in a high-rise penthouse that reeked of wealth and insecurity, Grayson Hale stood alone by the glass windows, staring out over the city. His reflection barely looked like himself anymore. He was unraveling. Everything he had built, his name, his power, his control over Aria, was slipping through his fingers because of one man who had played the long game better than anyone expected. He reached for a velvet box on the table and opened it. Inside, an engagement ring still sat, untouched. He had planned it months ago. Thought she would come back. Thought her father's disapproval would be enough to snap her out of her fantasy. But she hadn't come back. And now she never would. Unless he forced her to. The next evening, Aria walked alone near the edge of the city park, hoping for quiet. She held the sketch again, fingers running over the creases. She missed Eli more than she wanted to admit. She hadn't seen him since the conference. No calls. No messages. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished after that public reveal. And part of her feared he was pushing her away to protect her, or worse, because she was still part of the world that hurt him. Then a black SUV pulled up across the street. The back window rolled down slightly, just enough for her to catch a glimpse of someone familiar. Her heart dropped. It was Grayson. He got out slowly, like he had all the time in the world. Aria, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We need to talk. She stepped back. We have nothing to talk about. You're wrong. You don't know what you're involved in. Eli's not who you think he is. He's manipulating you. Her voice was cold. So were you. At least he didn't lie about who he loved. Grayson's jaw tensed. For a moment, he looked like he might snap. But instead, he stepped forward slowly, calmly. Come with me. Just for a few minutes. I need to show you something. She shook her head. Not a chance. Then his tone shifted, sharp, threatening. Get in the car, Aria. Or I promise you'll regret it. But before he could grab her arm, another vehicle screeched around the corner. A sleek, dark electric car pulled up fast. The passenger door swung open. Aria. Get in. It was Eli. She didn't hesitate. She sprinted across the street and jumped in. The door slammed shut behind her, and the car shot forward. In the rearview mirror, Grayson stood frozen, eyes wide with fury. Inside the car, Aria was breathless. She turned to Eli, unsure whether to be angry or relieved. Where have you been? Building a case. Watching your father and Grayson close in. I was going to wait until the gala. But he forced my hand. Aria stared at him, her heart racing. What's going to happen now? Eli's eyes were hard, determined. Everything. That night, the final preparations were locked in. Eli's legal team, whistleblowers, journalists, and federal agents, all would be at the gala. One wrong move, and the whole operation could collapse. But if it worked, the truth would explode on every screen in the country. Aria stood at the edge of her hotel balcony hours before the event, staring out at the skyline. She remembered when she used to believe life was about who you married, what you wore, and the headlines you made. Now, everything had changed. She had fallen in love with someone the world dismissed as worthless, only to discover he held more power than all of them. But power wasn't what mattered. What mattered was what he would do with it. And deep down, she knew, this wouldn't just end in headlines. It would end in bloodlines. In betrayal. Injustice. The city was quiet before the storm. The gala was hours away. And the world was about to learn who Eli Navarro really was. As the gala approached, tension coiled like a storm cloud waiting to break. Eli Navarro stood in front of the mirror, fastening a cufflink engraved with the initials of his late father. He barely recognized the man staring back at him, not because of the designer tuxedo or the security team that trailed his every move, but because, for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't hiding. Tonight, the past and present would collide, and he would finally expose the truth. Or so he thought. In a secure van parked across from the gala entrance, Devon monitored surveillance feeds. Everything was in place. Whistleblowers had arrived. The evidence, encrypted and ready, would go live as soon as Eli gave the signal during his speech. But just as Devon leaned forward to double-check the data stream, an alert popped up on his laptop, a firewall breach. Someone was attempting to override the backup servers. And worse, the breach was coming from inside Novacore's private cloud. Devon's voice crackled in Eli's earpiece. "We've got a problem. Someone's trying to bury the files." Eli froze. "Who has access?" There was a beat of silence before Devon responded. "Only 3 people. You. Me. And Aria." The name hit like a slap. Eli's breath caught, his heart racing for the first time in days, not because he believed Aria would betray him, but because someone wanted it to look like she had. He stormed out of the dressing room and pulled his phone. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. Meanwhile, Aria stood in the middle of the women's powder room on the second floor of the gala venue, staring at her reflection, confused and shaken. A stranger had slipped her a phone earlier with one message on the screen. "Check your email. You're being framed." She had. And what she saw nearly made her knees buckle. There were screenshots of Novacore's servers being accessed from her apartment's IP address. Files copied, then rerouted to an anonymous account linked to a private shell corporation, one connected to Marcus Hale, Grayson's father. It was a setup. And suddenly, it made sense. The quiet calls from her father. Grayson's sudden threats. They weren't just trying to stop Eli. They were trying to destroy her too. Make it look like she had leaked the evidence. She realized now, she wasn't just a bystander in Eli's war. She was a target. Outside the gala, a sleek limo pulled up. Grayson stepped out with a casual smirk and adjusted his tie. He moved like a man who knew the chessboard better than anyone else. He wasn't worried about being exposed tonight. He was counting on it, because everything had already been spun in the background. If Eli went public now, the narrative would flip. The media would run headlines, "Billionaire CEO's lover caught in corporate espionage scandal." Eli would be discredited, and Aria would take the fall. That was their play. It was brilliant. And cruel. Inside the main ballroom, cameras flashed as guests in shimmering gowns and black suits sipped champagne, unaware that the floor beneath their feet was about to collapse. Eli stepped up to the backstage curtain, waiting for his name to be announced. His hand hovered over his earpiece as Devon whispered updates. Backup system holding. But if this leak gets pinned on Aria, the story dies before it breathes. Eli's jaw tightened. Then we clear her. Now. Devon didn't hesitate. You have 15 minutes before the speech. I'm going dark to reroute the trace and expose the real source. But if anything goes sideways, I'll finish it, Eli cut in. No matter what. Back upstairs, Aria sprinted down the hallway, heels clacking against the marble. She pushed through a side door and emerged onto a quiet balcony just above the ballroom. Her eyes scanned the crowd, landing on a familiar figure lurking near the bar, Senator Westwood. He looked calm, even smug, sipping from a whiskey glass like the world hadn't turned against him. But when he noticed Aria staring down from above, his expression twitched. Just for a moment. Enough to confirm her fear. He knew she'd found out. She turned to go back inside, and froze. Grayson was there. His hand gripped her arm tightly. You should have picked me, Aria. But now, you're going to burn with him. She struggled, her voice sharp. You framed me. You're not the first person your father sacrificed, Grayson hissed. But you will be the last. Suddenly, a loud click echoed behind him, the sound of a gun cocking. Let her go, Eli's voice came from the shadows. Grayson turned, startled. Aria broke free, rushing to Eli's side as security stormed the balcony. But Eli didn't take his eyes off Grayson. The lies end tonight. Grayson smirked. Do they? In that moment, Devon's voice returned in Eli's earpiece. Got it. Leak source traced. Clean. You're clear to go live. Eli exhaled and took Aria's hand. Time to end this. As they stepped back inside, a large screen lit up above the ballroom stage. The announcer's voice rang through the air. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, Mr. Eli Navarro. Spotlights shifted. The room fell silent. And as Eli walked to the podium with Aria at his side, unaware guests began recording on their phones, sensing something big. But just as Eli reached the microphone, a high-pitched alarm began to blare from the speaker system. The power flickered. Then, darkness. A total blackout. Gasps filled the air. Someone screamed. Phones lit up the room like fireflies. And somewhere in the chaos, Aria grabbed Eli's hand tightly. What's happening? She whispered. Eli's voice was calm but strained. They're making their final move. In the dark, a familiar voice rang out, amplified by a hidden speaker. You were never supposed to survive, Eli. Neither of you were. It was Senator Westwood. And in that instant, the stakes changed. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was survival. The blackout only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like time had stopped. When the lights flickered back on, security scrambled, scanning every corner of the ballroom. The guests murmured in confusion, some trying to leave, others filming in anticipation. But on stage, Eli Navarro didn't flinch. He stood firm, gripping the microphone, Aria beside him, her hand clenched around a USB drive Devon had slipped her moments before the lights had cut. The truth was still intact. The broadcast could still happen. Eli cleared his throat, steadying his voice as cameras zoomed in from every angle. I know many of you came tonight expecting a donation, a speech, maybe a nice dinner. But what you're about to witness is the end of a lie, and the beginning of justice. A hush fell across the ballroom. Eli inserted the USB into the system, and behind him, the massive screen lit up with old photos, his parents, smiling on a jet. Then came blueprints, bank transfers, audio recordings, clear evidence that the plane crash was no accident. That two men, hungry for control of Novacor's military AI, had orchestrated a murder and buried it under false sympathy and forged investigations. The next image sent a gasp through the crowd, a recorded video confession from a former Westwood aide. Senator Calvin Westwood ordered the sabotage. He used campaign funds to pay off aviation inspectors. He feared the Navarros would blow the whistle on the military contracts. I was there when he signed off. Cameras swiveled in the direction of the senator. He had gone pale. The drink slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. But it wasn't over yet. Another file opened. Grayson Hale's voice, pulled from a wiretap. If Navarro ever shows up again, we finish what our father started. Aria's just leverage. If she gets in the way, we take her down too. Aria's breath caught in her throat. Even though she had suspected it, hearing it confirmed twisted something deep inside her. She turned toward Grayson, who stood frozen among the guests, surrounded by security agents closing in fast. He looked at her once, almost pleading, as if trying to say it wasn't real. But the footage didn't lie. The audio was clean. His fate was sealed. Then Senator Westwood bolted. The room exploded into panic as the senator shoved his way through the crowd toward a side exit. But Eli was already moving. He jumped from the stage, weaving between shocked guests, closing the distance. Outside, the senator reached his limo, fumbling for the door. Eli's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Stop running." Senator Westwood froze. The weight of his secrets had finally caught up to him. He turned, eyes wild, lips trembling. "You don't understand. It was never about you, Eli. It was about control. Power. That's the real world. Your parents were dreamers. They would have ruined everything." Eli stepped closer. "They believed in people. In truth. Something you gave up on long ago." The senator's hands dropped to his sides. He looked tired, defeated. "You think this ends with me? The system doesn't care about justice. It buries it." Eli nodded slowly. "Not tonight." Police cruisers pulled into the lot, sirens silent but lights flashing. Officers surrounded the senator. He raised his hands without a fight. Inside, Grayson had already been arrested, his phone and laptop confiscated. Devon's stream had gone viral. Social media exploded. #NovacoreTruth was trending within minutes. Every major news outlet was reporting live. And in the midst of it all, Aria stood on the stage, scanning the crowd for Eli. When he finally returned, their eyes met. She rushed to him, emotion tightening her chest. "You did it." He looked at her, really looked at her, this girl who had seen him when no one else did, who had risked everything to love a man with nothing. "We did it," he said softly. But just as they embraced, Devon's voice buzzed again in Eli's ear. "One last thing," he said. "The whistleblower who sent the first anonymous tip. It wasn't from someone on the inside. It came from a woman in Argentina. Name's Elena Navarro." Eli went still. He stepped back, searching Devon's face. "My mother?" Devon nodded. "She survived. She's alive." For a moment, the entire world seemed to fall away. Eli's breath hitched. Everything he'd done had been driven by grief, by the loss of both his parents. And now, a twist he never saw coming. The story wasn't over. Later that week, the shelter Eli built in his parents' name was filled with flowers, volunteers, and life. Kids from struggling families played in the courtyard. News cameras captured the soft opening, but the biggest headline had already been written: "The Beggar Who Brought Down Giants." That evening, as the sun set over the city, Eli returned to the university campus. Aria waited for him at the same bench where they'd first met. No bodyguards. No media. Just the sound of wind rustling the trees. He sat beside her, quiet for a long moment. "You really thought I was a beggar?" he teased gently. Aria smiled. "You were. A beggar, with the richest heart I've ever known." Eli pulled out a small box from his pocket, opened it slowly, revealing a simple gold ring with his mother's initials engraved on it. "I had nothing once. Then I found you. Will you marry me, Aria Westwood?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." And just like that, the story that began on a bench between a billionaire in disguise and a rebel-hearted girl had come full circle. The truth had found the light, justice had been served, and love had survived it all. A few weeks passed, and the world seemed to shift with it. News channels continued running segments on Eli Navarro, the mysterious tech billionaire who once sat on a bench as a beggar, sketching faces and watching people pass. But now, instead of whispers and mockery, his name was spoken with awe. Headlines called it the most dramatic tech world revelation of the decade, blending romance, revenge, and justice into a story people couldn't stop following. Senator Calvin Westwood and Gregory Hale both faced formal charges. Whistleblower testimony and the avalanche of evidence Eli had collected left no room for defense. The Senate distanced itself quickly, and Calvin's long career ended not with applause but with courtroom silence. Grayson was denied bail. His fall from a golden pedestal was fast and unforgiving. No more yacht parties. No more red carpets. Just a cold cell and a legacy of betrayal. Aria stayed quiet through it all. She'd given a short interview, standing beside Eli, not as his fiancée or some wealthy socialite, but as a woman who chose love in a world built on lies. "He didn't need to be rich," she said. "He just needed to be real. And he always was." Her words went viral, quoted in blogs and reshared on social media with millions of likes. It wasn't just a story anymore, it became a symbol. That truth could survive the ugliest storms. That love didn't need a title or a suit to be worth something. But beyond the cameras, life continued quietly for Eli and Aria. Together, they visited Argentina, where a small clinic near the Andes had a name handwritten in faded ink: Eli Navarro. She had survived the explosion but lived off-grid, hiding for years after being threatened by those who stole Novacore. She never imagined she'd see her son again. When they finally embraced, her first words were a whisper into Eli's shoulder: "You look just like your father." That reunion gave Eli something deeper than justice, it gave him home. Back in the States, Eli kept his promise. He didn't just return to luxury. He returned to purpose. The shelter in his parents' name wasn't a PR stunt. It became a place where anyone, no matter how broken or lost, could find warmth. He hired counselors, educators, and mentors. And every week, he'd show up, no cameras, no press, just a notebook and time to listen. Aria launched a foundation of her own, focused on helping young women pursue education without being silenced by powerful families. She used her voice not to rebel but to inspire. "We can love who we choose," she once told a room of students. "But first, we have to love who we are, and never let anyone buy our silence." Their wedding was small. No media, no extravagant venue. Just a quiet garden near the coast, a few close friends, Elena standing beside Aria, and Devon cracking jokes as he walked Eli down the aisle. The sun dipped low, casting gold over the water as Eli whispered his vows, promising not wealth or ease, but honesty. Aria promised the same, and they sealed it with a kiss where once they had only shared coffee and conversation on a worn bench. As the years passed, the world didn't forget their story. It turned into a documentary, a best-selling book, even a feature film. But the real story wasn't about the billions, or the betrayal, or even the courtroom drama. It was about what happened when one man let go of power to test if love could find him without it. And how one woman saw through dirt-covered clothes and chose the truth behind the eyes. Eli never returned to the bench full-time, but sometimes, when the day was too loud and the world too complicated, he'd walk back to that quiet spot near the university. Sometimes with Aria, sometimes alone, sketchbook in hand. People still passed him without noticing, and that was okay. Because the ones who mattered always did. For those watching the story unfold on YouTube, the takeaway was clear: never underestimate the quiet ones. Behind a simple smile could live a soul who's seen the worst, survived it, and come back stronger. And behind the walls of wealth and status, love can still break through, messy, unexpected, but always worth fighting for. So whether you're someone who feels invisible or someone afraid to break free from expectation, this story is for you. A reminder that sometimes the richest hearts were the poorest shoes. And sometimes, the biggest revenge, is to forgive, rebuild, and love anyway. And that is how a girl fell in love with a beggar, who turned out to be a billionaire not just in money, but in spirit.